My name is Sienna Hart, and I'm 31 years old. The night my mother told me to never come back, it was raining. Not the soft kind of rain that feels poetic in movies, it was the kind that soaks through your coat in seconds and fogs up your windshield, no matter how hard you run the wipers. I was sitting in my 2009 Honda Civic outside a gas station on Route 9, and my daughter Lily was curled up in the back seat with a fever of 103. She was 4 years old. She kept asking me why we weren't going home. I didn't have an answer for her. 3 days earlier, I had made the mistake of telling my mother the truth. I told her that Marcus, the man she had spent 2 years calling the best thing that ever happened to you, had been stealing money from my account, lying about his whereabouts, and had left me with $1,100 in debt I didn't even know existed. I thought she would hold me. I thought she would say, "Come home, baby." Instead, she looked at me across her kitchen table with cold, flat eyes and said, "You always find a way to ruin things, Sienna. You and that child are not my problem." My sister sat right beside her and said nothing. Not one word. I drove away with Lily in the back seat and $22 in my wallet. I want you to understand something. I am not a woman who falls apart easily. I had worked 2 jobs through community college. I had raised Lily mostly alone from the time she was 18 months old. I knew what hard felt like. But that night, sitting in that parking lot listening to my daughter's ragged breathing, I felt something crack open inside me that I didn't know how to close. I kept thinking, this is it. This is the bottom. There is nothing beneath this. Lily woke up crying around midnight. She wanted water. I had half a bottle left from a gas station stop 3 hours earlier, and I gave her all of it. I pressed my hand against her forehead in the dark and I prayed, not elegantly. Not with the right words, I just whispered, "Please. Not her. Whatever happens to me, please not her." I reclined my seat and stared at the ceiling of that car and made a list in my head of every option I had. The list was short. A coworker named Deb had offered me her couch once during a rough patch. I didn't have her number saved anymore. A shelter downtown had a wait list. My father had passed when I was 19. I had burned through my last favor months ago when I borrowed money for Lily's daycare. By morning, I had made exactly one decision. I was going to get Lily to a doctor even if I had to sit in that urgent care waiting room and beg. I pulled into a 24-hour pharmacy, used the last of my cash on children's Tylenol, and sat in the parking lot feeding it to her with a plastic dropper while she looked at me with these big, glassy eyes and said, "Mommy, are we on an adventure?" I told her yes. I told her we were absolutely on an adventure. What happened next is something I still don't fully know how to explain. It started with a man named Richard Caldwell who owned 3 companies and a foundation and who, on a Tuesday morning, walked into the exact same urgent care clinic I had dragged myself and my sick daughter into looking like something the rain had forgotten to wash away. I wasn't looking to be rescued. I wasn't looking for anything except a doctor who would tell me my daughter was going to be okay. But sometimes life doesn't ask you what you're looking for. Sometimes it just puts the next chapter right in front of you and waits to see if you're brave enough to read it. And I was just desperate enough to be brave. Richard Caldwell did not look like a billionaire that morning. He was wearing a gray pullover and carrying a paper coffee cup, and he sat down 2 seats away from me in that waiting room like any other tired person who needed to be somewhere else. Lily was half asleep on my lap, still warm with fever. And I was filling out intake forms and trying to figure out how to answer the insurance question without crying in public. I must have been visibly struggling because he leaned over quietly and asked if I needed a pen. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I was so exhausted that the smallness of that question broke something loose in me. I said, "I need a lot more than a pen." He didn't push. He just handed me his pen and looked back at his phone. It was Lily who started the conversation, the way 4-year-olds do, without permission and without shame. She looked up at him through her fever haze and said, "You have kind eyes." I wanted to disappear. He smiled genuinely, not politely, and said, "That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time." We talked for 40 minutes waiting for our names to be called. I told him more than I meant to. Not everything, but enough. He told me he ran a foundation that worked with single mothers in crisis housing situations. He said it like he was mentioning the weather. I remember thinking he was either telling the truth or was the most convincing liar I'd ever met, and at that point I was too tired to care which one it was. He gave me a card before he left. He said to call the foundation's intake number and mention his name. I almost threw it away in the parking lot. I stood there for a full minute holding it over a trash can. Then Lily grabbed it out of my hand and held it against her chest like it was something precious, and I thought, okay, we try. What followed the next 6 weeks was not a fairy tale. I want to be clear about that. Richard Caldwell did not swoop in and solve my life. The foundation placed us in transitional housing, a small 2-bedroom apartment shared with another mother named Vanessa and her son. I got a caseworker. I got connected to a job training program. I got Lily enrolled in a subsidized preschool 3 blocks away. It was structured and it was real, and it required me to show up every single day even when I didn't want to. Richard checked in occasionally through the foundation staff. He became a mentor more than anything else. He connected me to a woman named Patricia who ran a small event coordinating company and needed an assistant with drive and no fear of long hours. I had both. Within 4 months, I was full-time. Within 8 months, I had saved enough to sign a lease on my own apartment. I worked. I built. I rebuilt. Then came the day, 14 months after that gas station parking lot, that I saw my mother again. It was at my cousin Angela's birthday dinner, the kind of extended family gathering where you can't exactly opt out without causing more drama than attending. I walked in with Lily in a new dress, my hair done properly for the first time in what felt like years, wearing a blazer I had bought with my own earned money. My mother was standing near the kitchen. My sister was beside her. They saw me walk through the door, and I watched it happen in real time. Their faces went completely still. My aunt later told me it lasted about 5 seconds. 5 full seconds of silence where neither of them moved or spoke. Then my mother stepped forward and said my name like a question. I looked at her, this woman who had told me I was not her problem, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just a quiet, settled kind of sadness. Because I had spent 14 months becoming someone I was proud of without her help, without her blessing, and without her voice in my head. And standing there in Angela's hallway, I realized that her approval had stopped being the thing I was building toward. I smiled at her. I picked Lily up and held her on my hip. And I said, simply and without drama, "Hi, Mom. You look well." My sister started crying. My mother reached out and touched Lily's face with trembling hands. What happened after that is a longer story, complicated, unresolved, still in progress the way real family things always are. But I want you to hear this clearly. The version of me that walked into that room was not built by forgiveness or by a billionaire or by luck. She was built in a gas station parking lot at midnight, with $22 and a sick little girl and nothing left to lose. If you are sitting somewhere right now feeling like that was your bottom, I need you to know that floors exist so you can stand back up. If this story moved you, hit subscribe right now, because every week we bring you real stories of women who were broken open and built themselves back stronger. You don't want to miss what's coming next.